Have you ever prayed for something and you just felt like God wasn't answering your prayer and had somebody say to you, well, perhaps you need more faith? Is that how it works? Does God give faith in quantities where one person gets a quarter of a cup and somebody else gets a cup and a half? Do we just need more faith? Didn't Jesus say when he was on earth that some people had little faith? Wouldn't that indicate a quantity? And what about when his disciples asked him to increase their faith? What happened then? There's several questions, and I'm going to see if I can answer those in 5 minutes. Yes, Jesus did have 5 occasions when he talked to his disciples, only his disciples, and said that their faith was little. But as we look in the context, we discover that it's really not a quantity of faith that they didn't have, but it was the character of their faith. It was weak, and they needed greater understanding. When his disciples came to him and asked him to increase their faith, he didn't tell them how to have more faith. That was not his answer. And we can look at that again as well. So we're going to look at some of those issues in more depth, but I'd like to just kind of give you an illustration today of how faith works. We've talked about it already several times, but I thought of an illustration I could give you that might help. Faith is based upon understanding, whether it's generic faith or biblical faith. Generic faith is in what man says. Biblical faith is in what God says. And there's no difference in faith between generic faith and biblical faith. It's the same exercise. It's the same phenomenon that we exercise. But what we put our faith in is significantly different. If I were to tell you that it would take 930 billion years to travel at the speed of light across the observable universe, would you believe that? Or would you look for more evidence? Perhaps you would. But if I told you that what John, the gospel writer, said, these are written in order that you might believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that believing you might have life in his name. Do you believe that? Have you believed that? The evidence is what John gives in his whole book. He gives evidence of what Jesus did and of what Jesus said. And that's why he wrote that, so that it would give you confidence to know who Jesus is. And but that only comes by revelation from God. As I shared with you once before, Jesus said to Peter, when he said who Jesus was, he said, flesh and blood didn't reveal that to you, but my Father in heaven. Paul, the apostle writer, said in 1 Corinthians chapter 2, he said, no man knows the thoughts of a man except the spirit of a man who is in him. Neither does anyone know the thoughts of God except the Spirit of God. Now we receive the Spirit of God in order that we might know the things freely given to us by God. So God is the one who gives us understanding. He gives it freely to all who will receive it. So I'd like to illustrate that for you with lighting. I'm going to do a little adjusting here of my lights, and just to give you an illustration of what it's like when you don't have spiritual understanding. You begin to be in the dark. As a matter of fact, the people who don't have spiritual understanding are in total darkness. And God wants us to be in the light. And so when he gives us understanding, as we research and study and pray, God begins to open our eyes so that we understand. And when we understand it, the lights come on, and we exercise faith. But that faith may be weak. And what we need is we need more evidence. We need to trust God. We need to trust in what God has said. We need to humble ourselves. There's a number of things we'll talk about, but as we do those things, then the lights begin to come on even more brightly, and our faith, then we would say, becomes strong because we understand more clearly. Faith is all based on understanding. And understanding of spiritual truth only comes from God. So I hope that that helps you to understand a little more clearly how faith works. And God is the one who turns the lights on. And our dependence needs to be in Him. And we need to search the Scripture. So to understand things in the natural world, you need to listen to people who you can trust and do the research. In the spiritual world, you need to listen to who you can trust and do the research, and then only God can give you that spiritual understanding, and He gives it freely to all who seek it. And that's the truth. We'll continue in this vein next time.